We are not lost, we are scattered.
What if I told you Jews are not all of the Israel of the Bible?
From Shem came Jacob, which is the father of the 12 tribes of Israel.
Who are the 12 tribes of Israel today?
You guys are the true Hebrewites, are for real.
Israel stepping into its prophetic destiny as a light to the nations.
Israel is God's chosen people, always have been God's chosen people, always will be God's chosen people.
This is part of Israel's calling to be a light to the world.
By the time that was all happening, you were already deep in Africa, lost.
Yeah. You know that little hole? Especially the Igbo area. Like they are the part of the lost tribe of Israel.
You were then shipped to North America, South America, and the Caribbean to work.
It's playing out exactly as it's prophesied in the Bible.
We are the original African Hebrew. We are scattered all over.
In the Bible, there's a prophecy. And that prophecy says that in the end of time, all these people that were exiled, that we call the lost tribes of Israel, will get up and come back to Israel. And it'll start happening all over in the four corners of the world. And they'll just get up and start moving back. And what if it was actually happening? Here you have this prophecy, and people are actually getting up. They may be in your own neighborhood, and they're packing their bags, and to you, they're just somebody else packing their bags and moving. But in actual fact, they're responding to some kind of biblical post-hypnotic suggestion. I'm not talking about 1,000 years. I'm talking about 2,700-year-old suggestion that they're responding to now. And we could actually film these people and match the prophecy with the events. And the reason it should matter is that because once they do what they have to do, they trigger the apocalypse.
We are all familiar with what we know as the mainstream Jewish community, especially in America with the population estimated at 7.6 million people, and the state of Israel with nearly 6.8 million Jews who declare they began their return to their homeland by biblical prophecy on May 14, 1948. In the years following, Christian Zionists held this aliyah as a direct fulfillment of biblical prophecy. But does this tell the whole story? With the pregnant state of the world today, it may be beneficial to become Bereans and examine the scriptures a little closer. Abraham's seed would promise to increase as the stars of the heaven and the sand upon the seashore. In 627 BC, Jeremiah the prophet of Judah asked a poignant question when he lamented, "Is Israel a servant? Is he a homeborn slave? Why is he spoiled?" To answer this question with a sense of justice, I believe the most appropriate place to begin this inquiry is with the biblical Ham, noted as the father of the African nations, and his 4 sons. Zondervan's Compact Bible Dictionary tells us, Ham, the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood, and one of 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. Young's Bible Dictionary says, Ham, a son of Noah, and father of Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. While they all may have been dark-skinned, they were not the forefathers of the Negroid races, but rather of people associated with Egypt in the north of the continent of Africa. And the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia says, Ham as a nationality, the name given in Psalms, to Egypt as a descendant of Ham, son of Noah, as Shem means dusky or the like, and Japheth fair. It has been supposed that Ham meant, as is not improbable, black. This is supported by the evidence of Hebrew and Arabic, in which the word kamam means to be hot and to be black. Pirkei de Rabbi Eleazar is a midrash on the Torah and rabbinic exegesis of biblical stories. Let's take a look at Pirkei de Rabbi Eleazar 24. Noah brought his sons and his grandsons, and he blessed them with their several settlements, and he gave them as an inheritance all the earth. He blessed Ham and his sons, making them dark like the raven, and he gave them as an inheritance the coast of the sea. The eldest son of Ham was Cush. Genesis 10, 6 through 9. And the sons of Ham, Cush, and Mitzrayim, and Put, and Canaan. And the sons of Cush, Seba, and Havilah, and Sabta, and Raamah, and Sabtaka. And the sons of Raamah, Sheba, and Dedan. Rabbi Saida Gaon's 10th century Arabic translation of the Hebrew Bible substitutes Havilah with Zela in present-day Somalia. Benjamin of Tudela, the 12th century Judean traveler, identified Zela with the biblical location of Havilah. Today, Zela is called Salak, a town in Somaliland. Somalis are ethnically of the Cushitic ancestry. As offshoots of Havilah, Somalis originated in southern Ethiopia. Sheba and Dedan is situated adjacent Ethiopia and Somaliland across the Red Sea. The Nubians were also known as Cushites for 2,000 years. The Sudan was known as Nubia by the ancient Egyptians. The Sudanese are indigenous to the region, which is now northern Sudan and southern Egypt. The family of Cush became known as Ethiopians from the Greek Ethiops. The Cushitic branch of languages is spoken by Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti, Somalia, and northwestern Kenya. The South Cushitic or Rift languages of Tanzania are a branch of the Cushitic language family as well. There was a Cush in Africa, which is today known by the Greek name Ethiopia, which translates as burnt face. The online etymology dictionary says Ethiop, Ethiopian, Negro, from Greek Aethiops, long supposed in popular etymology to be from aethene, to burn, ops, face, sunburned. 1st century Judean historian Flavius Josephus would document in Antiquities of the Jews, Book 1, 6 and 2. The children of Ham possessed the land from Syria and Amanus and the mountains of Libanus, seizing upon all that was on its sea coast and as far as the ocean, and keeping it as their own. Some indeed of its names are utterly vanished away, others of them being changed, and another sound given them, are hardly to be discovered. Yet a few there are which have kept their denominations entire. For of the 4 sons of Ham, time has not at all hurt the name of Cush. For the Ethiopians over whom he reigned are even at this day, both by themselves and by all men in Asia, called Cushites. Genesis 10, 8 through 12. And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth, and he was a mighty hunter before Yahweh. Wherefore it was said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before Yahweh. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. Out of that land went forth Asher, and buildeth Nineveh, and the city Rehoboth, and Calah, and Rezin between Nineveh and Calah, the same is a great city. Smith's Bible Dictionary tells us Nimrod, rebellion, or the valiant, a son of Cush and grandson of Ham. The events of his life are recorded in Genesis 10 and 8, from which we learn that he was a Cushite, that he established an empire in Shinar, the classical Babylonia, the chief towns being Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh, and that he extended this empire northward along the course of the Tigris over Assyria, where he founded a second group of capitals, Nineveh, Rehoboth, Calah, and Rezin. Nimrod's kingdom began at Babel, which became Babylon, then expanded to Babylonian and is today's modern Iraq, written biblically Erech and Uruk. This was a Sumerian city located northwest of the city of Ur. Its modern name is Tel al-Waqar, a city located in southeastern Iraq. Akkad was the capital of the Akkadian Empire. What became Sumeria is the earliest known civilization in the historical region of southern Mesopotamia. the World History Encyclopedia tells us that Sumer was the southernmost region of ancient Mesopotamia, which is generally considered the cradle of civilization. The name comes from Akkadian, the language of the north of Mesopotamia, and means land of the civilized kings. The Sumerians called themselves the black-headed people, and their land in cuneiform script was simply the land, or the land of the black-headed people. And in the biblical book of Genesis, Sumer is known as Shinar. In his posthumously published 1836 book, Anacalypsis, Volume 1 of 2, Part 1 of 2, English magistrate, religious historian, and antiquarian Godfrey Higgins documents in a section of Chapter 4 titled Two Ancient Ethiopias, Great Black Nation in Asia. Mr. Higgins writes, "It was the opinion of Sir William Jones that a great nation of blacks formerly possessed the dominion of Asia and held the seat of empire at Sidon. These must have been the people called by Mr. Maurice Cushites or Cuthites, described in Genesis, and the opinion that they were blacks is corroborated by the translators of the Pentateuch called the 70, constantly rendering the word Cush by Ethiopia." Dr. Rudolph R. Windsor graduated from Gratz College in Pennsylvania in the 1970s, where he received a BA degree in the Hebrew language, history, and culture. He received his master's and doctoral degrees from the University of Metaphysics. Dr. Windsor writes in his 1969 book, From Babylon to Timbuktu, there were two Ethiopian nations in ancient times, Eastern Ethiopia and Western Ethiopia. There was an Ethiopian civilization in southern Mesopotamia, Babylon, but the people in this region did not use their tribal name, Ethiopia, to designate their nationality. They called themselves by the name of the cities they constructed and inhabited, or they called themselves by an event that happened there. For example, God confused the language of the people at the Tower of Babel. Babel means confusion in Hebrew. This is why the Ethiopian tribes called themselves Babylonians, referring to the name of the city that they constructed.
Are there many black Palestinians? Yes, there are in every part, in the north, in the middle, near the coast. You see the Mediterranean. Along the Mediterranean, there are black people. They are Palestinians. They are Palestinians.
So this idea that there are no black Africans in the Mediterranean world is laughable, and that they weren't just living their lives like everybody else is laughable. They experienced the same kinds of prejudices that others. I mean, if you're in Athens, if you're not an Athenian citizen, you're a metic, and you are subject to being sold into enslavement, whether you are Lysias and one of the wealthiest men in the city and his family, whether you're a common prostitute, and whether you are a Greek or not Greek. They don't distinguish within the category. You're simply not Athenian. And the Spartans are the same way, right? So this idea that people are being singled out for prejudice because they are quote unquote, black or they're African, more than anybody else in a Greek structure, at least, is kind of, to me, I don't see it anywhere. I haven't seen it in any of my sources anywhere. So I would say one of the things we need to sort of take away is, one, the ancient Mediterranean is not a white space. It's filled with people from all over. That people who we would call black Africans are all over the Mediterranean, and they are living lives like everybody else. They're merchants, they're entertainers, they're soldiers, they are shop owners, they are teachers, they are playwrights. They become, of course, in the Christian period, they become very, very heavily part of the early Christian church. We know that the kingdom of Ethiopia was the earliest fully converted, officially Christian kingdom in the ancient world. And so they are part of the Christian hierarchies. very early on. And so we see them everywhere. And so this idea that, it's like I said, again, this sort of impermeable boundary between the Sahara and North Africa and the Mediterranean is a false idea that doesn't work. And there's tons of evidence, visual evidence and literary evidence to show that that Black people were all over the ancient Mediterranean, and that most of them lived just like everybody else.
ChristianAnswers.net tells us the Cushites appear to have spread along extensive tracts stretching from the Upper Nile to the Euphrates and Tigris. At an early period, there was a stream of migration of Cushites from Ethiopia, properly so called, through Arabia, Babylonia, and Persia to Western India. The Hamite races, soon after their arrival in Africa, began to spread north, east, and west. 3 branches of the Cushite or Ethiopian stock moving from Western Asia settled in the regions contiguous to the Persian Gulf. Thus, the name Cush was applied to tracts of land on both sides of the Red Sea in the Arabian Peninsula, Yemen, and northeast Africa. Asher, the son of Shem, was the father of the Assyrians. Early on, Asher for a time fell under the loose dominion of the Sumerian city of Kish, and it was later occupied by both the Akkadian Empire and then the 3rd dynasty of Ur. Asher was the primary capital city of Assyria. Afterward, the capital was changed to Nineveh, or Nineveh, the home of King Sennacherib, king of Assyria during the biblical reign of King Hezekiah. Calah is the modern Nimrud, an ancient Assyrian city situated south of Mosul in northern Iraq. Antiquities of the Jews, Book 1, 6 and 2. But Nimrod, the son of Cush, stayed and tyrannized at Babylon, as we have already informed you. Flavius Josephus.
Other side, in Canaan land, what we call it Israel today, and the Syrian, they drop all these 2 brothers is called Sam. And the rest of world, they refer to the Yafis. Yafis, Sarah's brothers.
Amazing.
Yes. So, Ham get 2 sons, Cush and Mizraim. We call it Mizraim. Nubians and Jewish, they call it Mizraim. But Arab people call it Misr, according to what is coming in Quran here. Cush and Mizraim, they move it, or they used to live in country in the boundary of the Nile, in the source of the Nile. They live in hunting, cutting fruits, fishing, and eating the leaves of the trees. Yeah. So suddenly they move and they settle it in the singular body of the Nile after the love meeting or junction meeting for Blue Nile today and White Nile, what we call it Blue and White Nile.
The name of the next son of Ham is Mizraim. Mizraim, a son of Ham, an ancestor of various peoples, Ludum, Anamim, etc. The name of Egypt. Egypt, a land in northeastern Africa, home to one of the earliest civilizations, an ancient important cultural and political influence on ancient Israel. Geography, Egypt lies at the northeastern corner of Africa, separated from Palestine by the Sinai wilderness. In contrast to the modern nation, ancient Egypt was confined to the Nile River, a long, narrow ribbon of fertile land, the Black Land, surrounded by uninhabitable desert, the Red Land. From Flavius Josephus, Antiquity of the Jews, Book 1, 6, and 2. The memory also of the Mizrahites is preserved in their name, for all we who inhabit this country of Judea call Egypt Mistra, and the Egyptians Mizraim. Genesis 10, 13 and 14. And Mitzrayim begat Ludum, and Anamim, and Lehabim, and Nephtahim, and Pathraim, and Cashlazim, out of whom came Philistine and Caphtorim. The son of Mitzrayim, Cashlahim's family, is divided into the Philistines and of Caphtorims, with the Philistines frequently identified with Caphtor. By 2066 BC of the Bronze Age, at least a small colony of the Philistines had already gained a foothold in the land of Canaan during the time of Abraham. Genesis 21 and 34. And Abraham sojourned in the Philistines' land many days. When the Israelites finally ended up in Canaan, they came into contact with the Canaanite Phoenicians and the Kemetic Philistines. Goliath, arch nemesis of David, was a Kemetic Philistine. Jeremiah 47 and 4. Because of the day that cometh to spoil all the Philistines, and to cut off from Tyrus and Zidon every helper that remaineth. For Yahweh will spoil the Philistines, the remnant of the country of Caphtor. Antiquity of the Jews, Book 1, 6 and 2. Now all the children of Mizraim, being 8 in number, possessed the country from Gaza to Egypt, though it retained the name of one only, the Philistim. For the Greeks called part of that country Palestine.
In the same 2005 magazine that was there to support the exhibition that opened at the LA County Museum of Art for Tutankhamun, the Tutankhamun treasures, that they did a recreation and put that recreation on the cover, the one that looks like Barbra Streisand, the one that's got a super white face, and that there was a huge outcry. And at LACMA, at the museum, when the exhibition opened, because this reconstruction was on display for the first couple of weeks, we had people picketing, people of color picketing the museum, saying King Tut is back and he's black. And lest you think that I'm saying that this is overkill, it's absolutely not. It's that was a total white claim of people of color and all of their power and their gold, and it was a whitewashing of an ancient Egyptian reality. So I actually still proudly have my t-shirt, King Tut is back and he's black. And I learned more about race appropriation, ethnic appropriation, during that time period when I was co-curator at LACMA in 2005 than any other. Even arguably more than when I taught at Howard University for a year in 1999, 2000. So that's it's interesting to ask why there are all of these claims of the ancient Egyptians. But, you know, what I'd like to do today right now is to think a little bit more about the ethnicity of the ancient Egyptians from a more emic perspective. See what we can do with that. That's an interesting way to go. I will say that when people ask me what race were the ancient Egyptians, and you heard me and Jonathan talking last time, saying that race is a socially constructed concept. It's not something we can really use, but it's if we use the term ethnicity, okay, fine. But let me put it this way. If you need to choose and you need to identify and you need to understand what it would be today, why do you need to do that? But that's interesting. And I need to do it too. I think a lot of us need to understand how light the people were, how dark the people were, how they represented themselves. I would encourage all of you to look at the so-called mannequin of Tutankhamun from his tomb and look at the dark skin color that's used for his own face, an understanding of ethnicity from the Egyptian side, certainly without all of the complications of chattel slavery from Africa and a much more white versus black, literally, understanding of power and in economy and colonialism. But if I have to pick a race, whatever that is, or an ethnicity of the ancient Egyptians, I would call them people of color. And for an American audience, I would say that if they were in Alabama in 1955, they would have had to sit at the back of the bus.
What does it mean dark skin? If you just see my skin, it's not just white. No, it's little dark because in condition now less hot in Cairo. But when you go upper Egypt, I mean higher in Egypt, you will see that the skin starting to be dark. See, it's close, but he will see by his eyes when you go to Aswan and to Luxor. That's the border of Egypt and Sudan. All the Egyptians, just dark skinned. We have.
Are those the original Egyptians? They're
Yes.
the original Egyptians?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Were they the ones who were building the pyramids down and everything?
Yep. The ones build the pyramids, it's dark skinned.
Were the pharaohs dark skinned?
The pharaohs was dark skinned as well.
Mitzrayim, or the Egyptians, were the principal descendants of the biblical Ham, and they derived their appellation from him before the Greeks changed their name to Egypt. The real name of Ham is Ham. If anyone is seriously confused about the origins of the original Egyptians, you need only know that they derived their indigenous moniker from their father, the biblical Ham. Historically, Afro-Asiatic languages did not use vowels, therefore, his name would have been written as such. From these letters, their language became known as Hamitic, translated biblically as Hamitic. His descendants became known as Hamites, or biblically as Hamites. Today, we recognize this as Kemet. Hamite means black land, i.e. Hamite land. Arabic shows the guttural is not a true KH, but the hard breathing H, which are both represented by the 8th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Chet. Egypt, strictly one of the names of Memphis. It was taken by the Greeks as the name of the whole country. The Egyptian name, Kemet, means black country, possibly in reference to the rich delta soil. The Arabic is Mizra, which is derived from Mitzrayim, the name of a son of the biblical Ham. When Joseph's 10 brothers went into Kemet to buy corn, Joseph recognized them, but they did not recognize him amongst the Africans. When Joseph and his brothers went into Canaan to bury their father Israel in 1859 BC, the Israelites were mistaken for Africans by Africans. Genesis 50:11. And when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning in the floor of Atad, they said, "This is a grievous mourning to the Egyptians, wherefore the name of it was called Abel Mizraim, which is beyond Jordan. When Moses was born in 1525 BC, he was rescued from the Nile River and taken into the home of Pharaoh to be raised as the African king's grandson. Moses was both raised and educated in North Africa. Exodus 2:10. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses, and she said, because I drew him out of the water. Acts 7:22. And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was mighty in words and in deeds. Moses was mistaken for an African. Exodus 2:19. And they said, a Kemite delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us and watered the flock.
Moses also is get buried here as the Pharaoh house. We are pharaohs here. Pharaohs, all of them, they are black. Look at their figure. Look at the nose and his lips. And they black top shimmering. They are black. Imagine about this climate. I live in this climate. How I become dusky color? According to my climate.
Yes.
How Germans and British become white? Because frozen cold. They become white, you know, and thin nose. I have wide nose to get more oxygen in extremely hot climate. In summer, it's increased here to 50 degrees. Thin nose cannot collect oxygen.
So you're telling me at the end of it, the ancient Egyptians of the old were of darker skin tone?
Yes, they were dark skin.
Welcome back to the study of antiquity and the Middle Ages. As always, I am your host, Nick Barksdale, and today we are joined once again by Dr. Rebecca Futo-Kennedy, who's going to take us through a thought-provoking episode on the term sub-Saharan and the whitewashing of ancient North Africa.
Yes, I just think we should sort of like, because this idea, this like sort of continually trying to find this idea of, you know, separating out North Africa from sub-Saharan as if the Sahara was the impermeable boundary that nobody could get through is really a continually problematic type of argument. Particularly since we have early texts that tell us that, right, Herodotus tells us that, he says the Ethiopians and the Garamantes are indigenous to North Africa, and that, of course, the Phoenicians and the Greeks are not. But he makes it very clear that people they call Ethiopians are indigenous to North Africa and Northwest Africa in particular. So I think when people ask about this stuff, what they're really trying to ask, and they don't want to ask the question, so they use this phrase sub-Saharan, is, are Egyptians white like us? And they don't want to say that, because if they say things like that, then, you know, because what happens when you sort of subsume whiteness for the entirety of North Africa, right? You want to claim the ancient civilization without modern Islam being attached to it. And then you want to separate it from blackness. That's the only reason why people use this term. There's no genetic distinction to be made here. There is no political distinction to be made here in antiquity, or in even clearly up until the modern world. If people aren't using the word, they're not making a distinction about it until they want to use it. All of Africa was a colonial playground until a certain period, and then we're going to make a distinction between the oil-rich Arab states and the mineral-rich and other resource-rich exploitable states below the Sahara that are not oil-rich states, right? Agricultural versus other. So I think anybody asking the questions about sub-Saharan and how these ideas apply to the ancient world need to stop, because they are clearly, absolutely modern impositions of ideas and ideology, and very clearly they are very recent modern impositions. And whenever people say that they want to avoid imposing modern ideologies onto ancient world, they're okay with imposing modern ideologies onto the ancient world as long as it's their modern ideologies, like the category of sub-Saharan. So I think we need to like nix that one. What you're really asking is, are they black or are they white? And the answer is neither, and both, but really neither. There's no white people running around in ancient Egypt.
Pharaoh Asorkin was the 5th king of the 21st dynasty of ancient Egypt and was the first pharaoh of ancient Libyan origin. He ruled Egypt from 992 to 986 BC. Pharaoh Khosra conquered Upper Egypt around 747 BC during the Nubian invasion and established his rule over both Nubians and Upper Egyptians. He was the pioneer of the 25th dynasty. Pharaoh Pi was an ancient Kushite king and founder of the 25th dynasty of Egypt, who ruled Egypt from 744 to 714 BC. These are just 3 Hamitic, non-Egyptian pharaohs who ruled over the Egyptian empire. This all predated the son of King Cyrus, Cambyses II, and his Persian army invading Egypt in 525 BC, as well as the invasion of Alexander the Great in 332 BC. These were the first European types to conquer ancient Kemet. The mixed multitude that left Egypt for Kemet was based on ethnicity, not skin color.
Egyptians are black. The real Egyptians are black because the real Egyptians, they are real Africans. So those people in Lower Egypt you see in Cairo, Alexandria, and the Falahins area, they were mixed between the Turkish, Mamluks, French, English, Romans. So those people who come to attack Egypt in that time, they couldn't come to Upper Egypt, to the south, which we still have the same color, our dark color or black color. So they couldn't mix with us.
Next question. Okay, what question?
الريين أصليين اللي هم السمر. إنما البيض اللي كلهم. You see, I explained to him about the Nubians and the Egyptians. They were not white. They are black Africans. So he say now, ليه هنا الناس لسه سمر في الصعيد وفي بحري بيض.
بحري دولة مش أصلا مش أساس مصر خالص.
He said the people in Lower Egypt, most of them they are not Egyptians. They are Greeks, Francois.
Nubia or Kush rises up in the sections which between Luxor until Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, Ethiopia.
Wow.
because these people originated from there. Watch this. They are a children or ancestor of Ham. Ham, son of Prophet Noah. Noah, who was flooded by the boat, according what is coming in Torah and the Bible and in Quran as well. He flooded and robbed Ham in east coast of Central Africa, along the equator area, the country boundary, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, Ethiopia, Sudan.
This is the Egyptian Gallery, or one of the Egyptian galleries at the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge, and I wanted to start off here because this is where the project started. One particular object that's been on display for the last 20 or 30 years actually inspired the Afro Comb project. The comb dates to around 5,000 or 5,500 years ago, and it's very typical of the type of combs that we see from early Egypt. The teeth are very long. They have quite wide gaps in between, and as you can see from the comb, one of them is actually broken, probably because it was used. At the top of the comb, it's quite interesting because I suppose in some respects is a parallel to the black fist that you see on a lot of modern Afro combs. We see an ancient symbol. It seems to represent bull's horns, and this particular symbol was quite common in early Egypt. And it represents fertility and also strength. It's a very masculine symbol, and so perhaps the person who was buried with this comb could have been a man.
I am a black Egyptian. My father is much darker than I am. My mother is lighter than I am. In Egypt, people are identified by the religion first, not the race. So in Egypt, if you are Christian, you are a minority person. But if you're black, you're not a minority person. You are a part of the mainstream society. And I came from this background. And in Egypt, you identify as Arab and as Muslim. And in this country, when I first came, I identified myself as Arab American and Muslim first. And gradually, I became to identify myself as black. I came to the U.S. in 1978. And I became a U.S. citizen in 1985. When I became a U.S. resident, I was told by the Immigration and Naturalization that I am white. And I told them that I'm black, and they said, no, in this country, you are white. All Arabs in this country, all Arab immigrants are white. I didn't pay much attention in the beginning to this because in the Arab world, we identify with our ethnicity first as Arabs and then with the race second as black or white or whatever. But in this country, you identify with your racial group first and then with your ethnicity second. Gradually, I became black first and Arab second. And I rejected my white classification publicly for the first time in 1987, in February, as a panelist in a function sponsored by the Association of the Study of Black Life and History in Detroit. I said that I belong to two minority groups. I am Arab American and Black American, and I'm racially black and ethnically Egyptian. I was harassed by my employer right after that. I work for a white school district. The superintendent is white. All the associate superintendents are white, even though that we provide services to 30% black population. But the organization is white and the approach is very white. The attitude towards me changed completely after I went out publicly and rejected my white classification. One coworker came to me and told me, a white coworker came to me and told me right after the function that he met with the superintendent, and if I don't keep my mouth shut, my educational career is over. He said, you have nothing to do with these people. You have a history and a culture. These people came from the jungle. You have nothing to do with them. These people lie and steal. When I see one of them in my neighborhood, I call the police.
Sir Gaston Maspero, a French Egyptologist, stated that by the almost unanimous testimony of ancient Greek historians, they, ancient Egyptians, belonged to the African race which settled in Ethiopia. Greek philosopher Apollodorus of Athens, who lived during the 2nd century BC, noted that the Greeks called Egypt the country of the black-footed ones. Latin historian Ammianus Marcellinus, who lived during the 4th century CE, said that the men of Egypt are mostly brown or black with a skinny, desiccated look. Greek poet Aeschylus from the 5th century BC wrote, when describing Egyptian seamen, "I can see the crew with their black limbs and white tunics." 5th century BC Greek historian and contemporary of Socrates, Herodotus, has stated in a few passages that the Egyptians were black dark. Translators of Herodotus have said that a Greek oracle was known to be Egyptian because she was black. The natives of the Nile region were black with heat, and Egyptians were black-skinned with woolly hair. Herodotus documents in his book, The Histories, Book 2, for the people of Kokis are evidently Egyptian, as I perceived myself before I heard it from others. So when I had come to consider the matter, I asked them both, and the Kokians had remembrance of the Egyptians more than the Egyptians of the Kokians. But the Egyptians said they believed that the Kokis were a portion of the army of Sesostris. That this was so, I conjectured myself, not only because they are dark-skinned and have curly hair, this of itself amounts to nothing, for there are other races which are so, but more because the Kokians, Egyptians, and Ethiopians alone of all the races of men have practiced circumcision of the genitals from the first. French philosopher Constantine de Volney writes in his 1788 book, Travels Through Syria and Egypt, in the years 1783, 84, and 85, de Volney writes, "All the Egyptians have a bloated face, puffed up eyes, flat nose, thick lips." On seeing that head, typically Negro in all its features, I remembered the remarkable passage where Herodotus says, "As for me, I judge the Kokians to be a colony of the Egyptians because like them they are black with woolly hair." He continued, "When I visited the Sphinx, I could not help thinking that the figure of that monster furnished the true solution of the enigma of how the modern Egyptians came to have their mulatto appearance. In other words, the ancient Egyptians were true Negroes of the same type as all native-born Africans. That being so, we can see how their blood, mixed for several centuries with that of the Greeks and Romans, must have lost the intensity of its original color while retaining nonetheless the imprint of its original mold. Just think that this race of black men today, our slaves, and the object of our scorn is the very race to which we owe our arts, sciences, and even the use of speech. Just imagine, finally, that it is in the midst of people who call themselves the greatest friends of liberty and humanity that one has approved the most barbarous slavery and questioned whether black men have the same kind of intelligence as whites." In his 1791 work, The Ruins or Meditation of the Revolutions of Empires, Constantine Volney wrote, "There are people now forgotten discovered while others were yet barbarians the elements of the arts and sciences, a race of men now rejected from society for their sable skin and frizzled hair, found on the study of the laws of nature, those civil and religious systems which still govern the universe. Lower down those dusky points are the pyramids whose masses have astonished you." The third son of Ham was Phut. From Antiquities of the Jews, Book 1, 6 and 2. Phut also was the founder of Libya and called the inhabitants Phutites from himself. There is also a river in the country of the Moors which bears that name, whence it is that we may see the greatest part of the Grecian historiographers mention that river and the adjoining country by the appellation of Phut. but the name it has now has been by chance given it from one of the sons of Mitzrayim, who was called Libyos. The name of Phut's territory was named for one of the sons of Mitzrayim, Lehabim, or Libyos, which today we call Libya. Pliny the Elder and Ptolemy both placed the river Phut on the west side of Mauritania, modern-day Morocco. In 1911, when the secret French and Spanish agreement was concluded, which divided southern Morocco, the smaller part, the Western Sahara, fell to Spain, and the bigger one, Mauritania, became a part of the French colonial empire. Ptolemy also mentions a city, Plataea, in Libya.
Yes, hello Mark. Thanks to have me tonight. It is a great opportunity for all the Tubu to be here and to show their culture and to give some description about Tubu. First of all, I want to start with the beginning with the Tubu description about the Tubu. We are minority and indigenous people of the Africa, and we are indigenous people of the land, Libya and Chad and Niger. We are around 2 million people living in this land for around 30,000 years, and we are the original indigenous people of this land.
It's a fascinating thing when you talk about the presence being there for tens of thousands of years. Do you experience any discrimination, any kind of differences based on your racial identification there?
Yes, about the living in the north of Africa, especially, it is very hard. And I'm going to give you some description about the discrimination that people facing in this land. So in the past, in the colonial Muammar Gaddafi time, the Tubu passed a lot of kind of marginalization, and they pushed away from their land, and they are their land because the discrimination against the Tubu because they are only black people. And after the revolution time, a lot of things has been changed in the beginning, and the situation was somehow it was good. But now the situation is very bad, and Tubu are under threat, and we are living in very dangerous cases, discrimination, and a lot of people have been killed in different cases, and things are getting worse and worse and worse by the time.
The fourth son of Ham was named Canaan. Genesis 10:15-20. And Canaan begat Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusite, and the Amorite, and the Girgasite, and the Hivite, and the Archite, and the Sinite, and the Arvadite, and the Zemarite, and the Hamathite. And afterward were the families of the Canaanites spread abroad. The first son of Canaan, Heth, inhabited Lebanon, a city on the northern boundary of the Canaanites. It was the mother city of Tyre. The word Zidonians often includes all the Phoenicians, as well as the inhabitants of Zidon. It was the first home of the Phoenicians on the coast of Palestine. The Hittites, Girgasites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites were all Canaanite tribes that Israel was admonished to stay away from. Heth is, according to Genesis 10:15, the second son of Canaan, who is son of Ham, the son of Noah. Heth is the ancestor of the Hittites, second of the 12 Canaanite nations descended from his sons who lived near Hebron. Abraham buried Sarai in Hebron on the land of the Hittites. Genesis 23, 2-7. And Sarah died at Kirjah-Harbah, the same as Hebron in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah, and to weep for her. And Abraham stood up from before his dead, and spake unto the sons of Heth, saying, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. Give me a possession of a burying place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. And the children of Heth answered Abraham, saying unto him, Hear us, my Lord. Thou art a mighty prince among us. In the choice of our sepulchre bury thy dead. None of us shall withhold from thee his sepulchre, but that thou mayest bury thy dead. And Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, even to the children of Heth. This tomb amongst these ancient Africans became known as the Cave of the Patriarchs. This is the burial place of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebekah, and Leah.
I am Canaanite in Israel. I go American and I help with the people black in America. أنا كنعاني أنا من إسرائيل كنعاني. أنا أحب أساعد الشعب الأسمر في أمريكا.
We have a little Canaanite boy, and he is with the donkey, and he's taking care of his sheep. A responsible young man. They're goats, and one of them's got great big horns. I hope he doesn't hit me. This is what we're called.
Move in some, Dad. Move in some. I don't have my wide angle. I can't get the
Okay. How of me? Now, how am I now?
I can't see.
Right, people are. And Israel. Yes, indeed. Near Jerusalem, where Rahab was. Near Jericho. Some goats here with some long horns. Oh, let me get out of the way here.
עברית. Okay. חברי, מה העם שלך? אני מהעם כנענים. גרים פה. יש אנשים 500. 500. העם פה כנענים? יש, מהעם.
Do you have something to say to the brothers, the black brothers in America? In Arabic and English?
احنا مبسوطين بالزيارة وبنبعث سلاماتنا لكل الناس الطيبين بأمريكا. سمر لأخواننا السمر بأمريكا.
And what's that in English?
We sent flowers from our land here to our brothers, black people in America, and we like them.
Okay, all right.
Numbers 13 and 21. So they went up and searched the land from the wilderness of Zin unto Rahab, as men come to Hamath. Today, the Canaanite Hamathites from Genesis 10 and 18 in their territory Hamath, which is shortened to Hamah, is located in Upper Syria. The Sinites, who in ancient times dwelt in the desert of Sin, were a people who also descended from Canaan, the son of Ham, according to Genesis 10 and 17 and 1 Chronicles 1 and 15. Exodus 16 and 1. And they took their journey from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came unto the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month, after their departing out of the land of Egypt. Moses' sister Miriam was buried in the desert of Sin. Numbers 20:1. Then came the children of Israel, even the whole congregation, into the desert of Zin in the first month, and the people abode in Kadesh, and Miriam died there and was buried there. According to the ATS Bible Dictionary, Sinim from Isaiah 49:12 is a people very remote from the Holy Land, towards the east or south, generally believed to mean the Chinese, who have been known to Western Asia from early times and are called by the Arabs Sin and by the Syrians Sini. So we're looking at the far east. Isaiah 49:12. Behold, these shall come from far, and lo, these from the north and from the south, and these from the land of Sinim. According to the Dictionary of Greek and Roman Geography, Sine, the ancient nation of the Chinese, whose land is first described by Ptolemy. According to the description of Ptolemy, the country of the Sine extended very far to the south and was connected with the east coast of Africa by an unknown land, so that the Indian Ocean formed a large Mediterranean Sea. He does not venture to define its eastern boundary, but finishes his account of the known earth with the 180th degree of longitude, without, however, denying that there were tracts of unknown land still farther to the east. According to the Institute for Creation Research, Sinai from Genesis 10:17, the other 9 sons of Canaan were the Canaanite tribes that inhabited the land when the Israelites entered it. The Amorites are identified in the tablets as the Amaru. The Sinites may be connected in ethnology with the wilderness of Sin and Mount Sinai in the south, and with the Assyrian god Sin, and even with Sinim from Isaiah 49:12, and the people of secular history called Sine or Chinese. Most of the modern population of China has its genetic origins in Africa, according to research released today. Scientists say prehistoric humans may have migrated east across Southeast Asia, then turned north to settle in China. Proceedings of National Academy of Science. In layman's terms, the Chinese are descended from Kemetic Canaanites.
I will explore the figure of Sin or Shin, considered the progenitor of the Chinese according to the Bible, and discuss his origin. This character is known as Sin, also called Shine, and his name is remarkably similar to various terms, including the name China itself. In Hebrew, his name is pronounced as Shimi, and may have meanings related to peak, clay, or mud, although some suggest a meaning associated with the moon. Sin, the son of Canaan, is part of the lineage of Ham, who is the son of Noah. Therefore, he was one of Noah's grandsons, being one of the 11 sons of Canaan. Sin is indirectly mentioned in the Bible through his descendants, known as Sinians in the Portuguese version and Sinites in the English version. These different ways of naming the people can be confusing. It is believed that the Sinians, who were Sin's people, the Chinese, had their origins in Zim, a coastal city north of Phoenicia. The figure of Sin plays a significant role in the Far East, being associated with the possible origin of Chinese civilization. The Chinese themselves often point to the capital Shenxi, whose name suggests Father Sin, as the most likely place of origin of their civilization. Regarding linguistic identification, various words and prefixes related to Sin or variations of the name are often associated with ancient China. For example, Xi'an is the capital of Shaanxi province, Xi'an is an autonomous region in China. There are also other variations such as Shanghai, a major Chinese city, Shaanxi, a Chinese province, Shandong, another Chinese city, Shenyang, another Chinese city, and Tianjin, also a Chinese city. In addition to Sin being considered one of the ancestors of Asian peoples, including not only the Chinese but also the Japanese, Koreans, Filipinos, Indonesians, and other ancient groups, it is believed that over time, his descendants mixed with the descendants of Tagarma, resulting in different lineages. These divisions would include the native indigenous peoples of the Americas, who arrived long ago from Asia, as well as the Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, Filipinos, Indonesians, Mongolians, and others, all considered descendants of Sin, possibly influenced by the lineage of Tagarma.
How did Africa get its name?
Many people don't know that Africa was not always called by its current name. In fact, the original name of Africa is Alkebulan. So, why is Africa called Alkebulan? Let's dive into the history behind this fascinating name. The name Alkebulan has its origins in ancient Egypt. The word is derived from the Arabic language, which means the land of the blacks, or mother of mankind, or Garden of Eden. The ancient Egyptians referred to the land of the blacks as Kush or Nubia. The term Alkebulan was first used by the Moors, who were African people that conquered Spain and Portugal in the 8th century. They used the term to describe the entire continent of Africa. The name Alkebulan represents the rich history and diversity of the African continent. It is a reminder of the continent's ancient civilization, which dates back to over 5,000 years.
So where did the name Africa come from then?
Abraham, whose first son Ishmael was born to him by an African named Hagar, remarried after the death of Sarah. His second wife, Keturah, by whom 6 sons were born, including Midian, who begat Ephah and Epher, who Josephus documents as Ephas and Ophan, and later Apher. Antiquities of the Jews, Book 1, 239. Now for all these sons and grandsons, Abraham contrived to settle them in colonies, and they took possession of troglodytes in the country of Arabia the Happy, as far as it reaches to the Red Sea. It is related of this Ophan that he made war against Libyan and took it, and that his grandchildren, when they inhabited it, called it from his name, Africa. 240. And indeed, Alexander Polyhistor gives his attestation to what I here say, who speaks thus: Cleodemus the prophet, who was also called Malchus, who wrote a history of the Jews in agreement with the history of Moses, their legislator, relates that there were many sons born to Abraham by Keturah. Nay, he names 3 of them, Apher and Surim and Jophran, that from Surim was the land of Assyrian denominated, and that from the other 2, Apher and Jophran, the country of Africa took its name. Apher means dry earth, dust. By adding the Latin suffix "ica," you denote a specific place, a land, the land of Apher.
Middle East 1899, never defined in a generally accepted way. Early use with reference to British India. Hence Middle Eastern, 1903. Online Etymology Dictionary. The Middle East is the common term for a region consisting of countries in Southwest Asia. And, usually, at least part of North Africa. It is an interesting term. Middle of what? East of what? While the term is now widespread both inside and outside the region, it is in fact relatively new. It was coined only at the end of the 19th century by the British Foreign Service. and used in a 1902 article by a United States naval officer. Teachmideast.org. The middle of what? East of what? The region's very name is based on a European view of the world, and it is a European view of the region that shaped it. The Europeans used ink to draw lines on maps. They were lines that did not exist in reality and created some of the most artificial borders the world has seen. An attempt is now being made to redraw them in blood. Prisoners of Geography Tim Marshall.
Why I took you here is that I want to show you that the country called Israel is sitting on the African tectonic plate. It's like all continents are sitting on a plate, okay? And these plates, sometimes they slide in, you know, and they rub one another. And see, and what happens, that's what happens when earthquakes happen. The plates begin to slide among one another. And if you get a crack in one of the plates, magma will come up, you know, like a volcano. A magma will come up and it will cause, you know, great devastation because of the volcano, but it's because of the shifting of these tectonic plates. Now, we're going to go over here and I'm going to show you where Israel sits on the African tectonic plate, which means that Israel is northeast Africa. Now, when we look at this map, this is the Sinai, okay? This is the Red Sea. This is Egypt. This is the Sinai. This is Israel. All right, this is Saudi Arabia over here. Now, if you see this in Hebrew, it says Haluach Afrikani, the African plate. Here it is right here. Israel is sitting right here. Israel is sitting on the Haluach Afrikani, which means that Israel is northeast Africa. This is the Mediterranean Sea right here. So people say, well, why do you say, but it's Asia Minor? You know, when Europeans be talking about this Asia Minor, I ask them, where's Europe Minor? Where's America Minor? Okay, this is the only continent with a minor. And you know what that minor is? It's a minor lie. It's really a major lie. Understand what you're talking about? Some Asia Minor. Where's Europe Minor? Where's America Minor? But see, when they say Asia Minor, they don't have to classify this land as being part of the African continent. And they want to call it the Middle East. The middle of what? Europeans classified this area as the Middle East. You know, and then since this the Middle East, the other question, where the Middle West? Where the Middle North and where the Middle South? They don't have no geographical terms like that. And the only reason why they use that term, Middle East, because it disconnects the proper connotation that should go with describing this land geographically. So, let the truth speak for itself. It's not my interpretation. Here it is in Hebrew. This is written in Hebrew.
And in Hebrew that says?
This says Luach HaAfrikani, the African tectonic plate. That's where Israel is sitting on.
The Negev in Israel is an extension of the Sinai Desert in Egypt and accounts for more than half of Israel. Both Israel and Lebanon sit on the African tectonic plate, a major plate straddling the equator as well as the prime meridian. The Suez Canal, constructed between 1850 and 1869, is a thin man-made waterway that runs between Israel and Egypt. Despite this artificial barrier, they still share natural land bridges. Keep in mind, the Hebrews walked to the Promised Land.
I am Sar Madiel Ben Yehuda. Sar means minister. My title in the community, my role as minister, my portfolio is that of information. I'm charged to collect, to analyze, and then to disseminate information about the Hebrew Israelites here in Israel, about our particular history as a community and our history as a people connecting back to this land. We consider Israel to be Northeast Africa. We are living here in the southern portion of Israel in what is known as the southern Judean mountains. And of course, we have to make this clear that Israel predates any Palestinian connections here to this land. When you look at the name of Palestine, it was the name that the Romans gave to the land formerly known as Judea. Now, I didn't say Jewish or Judaism, but Judea. So the Judeans were the people that actually lived in this portion of this land prior to it being named Palestine by the Romans. So this is what we consider to be Northeast Africa. We are sitting on the African tectonic plate. Without question, we are in Northeast Africa. We are landlocked to Egypt, with the exception of the Suez Canal, which was a man-made ditch, a boundary now between, in fact, it's not even really a boundary anymore since Egypt has reclaimed the Sinai Peninsula. But nevertheless, even those of us who are Pan-Africanists in our thinking and Afrocentric, we forget and we leave off that portion of Northeast Africa and don't want to claim anything beyond that. Of course, Afrocentrists are still fighting tooth and nail for Egypt to be included as a part of Africa, because most Egyptologists and anthropologists, archaeologists of the Eurocentric persuasion will say that Egypt is in Africa. They had to concede that, but then they still draw the line by saying that they weren't Africans like that. In other words, they weren't dark-skinned people. And of course, this is all part of the Great Deception. And the reality is that if they give up Egypt, ancient Kemet, if they give that up and say that that was a part of Black Africa, then they will also have to give up Israel. And that's why they draw the line at Egypt, because if they give up Egypt, they've got to give up Israel.
Haaretz is an Israeli newspaper founded in 1918 and headquartered in Tel Aviv, Israel. It is the longest running newspaper currently in print in Israel. Haaretz published an article titled "The Dangers of Eurocentrism" on September 14, 2012, which states, "In fact, Israel itself, being geologically situated as it is on the African tectonic plate, is a part of Africa. Never mind Eurovision and the Euro League. Israel is surely not in Europe." Whence this idea of not being a part of Africa? From colonial area conquests and subsequent map-making exercises. And as much as identity politics is an exercise in defining, belonging, and exclusion, the act of defining what Africa was also defined what Africa wasn't. Accordingly, Israel is invariably situated outside of Africa, often alongside Egypt and the entire northern tier of African nations, as part of the imaginative geopolitical construct called the Middle East. Sub-Saharan, a reference to the region of Africa below the Sahara Desert.
If you're going to live by Herodotus, you got to die by Herodotus too. And if you're going to cite Herodotus for evidence of one thing, then you have to accept the fact that Herodotus says that the Black people, Ethiopians in our ancient parlance, Ethiopians really in our ancient parlance, are indigenous to North Africa. They're indigenous to Libya, which is his word for basically everything north of the Sahara, because as far as he's concerned, south of the Sahara is uninhabitable, right? They believe that that was an uninhabited region, uninhabited zone. Nobody lived there, it was too hot. They believe that that was an uninhabited region, uninhabited zone. Nobody lived there, it was too hot. Nobody lived there, it was too hot.
Before the end of the infamous apartheid regime, informal recognition of a Black African majority government in 1994, South Africa was never designated as part of sub-Saharan Africa, unlike the other African-led states. In fact, it was increasingly fashionable for a number of news outlets, websites, academics, governments, the IMF, the World Bank, and even the United Nations to say such. And such is happening south of the Sahara, but north of South Africa. So why was the Rainbow Nation excluded? Back then South Africa was either termed as White South Africa or the subcontinent, much like the Indian subcontinent we know of today. Soon after the triumph of the African freedom movement and Nelson Mandela led an African majority government, South Africa quickly became sub-Saharan Africa. What happened so suddenly for South Africa's geography to be so classified differently? Would it make sense if all of South America, south of the Amazon, is called sub-Amazon America? Or Eastern France, Italy, Slovenia and Croatia go by the term sub-Alps Europe? The truth is geographically these regions do not exist. Nobody refers to them as sub, but everyone has been indoctrinated to use this when referring to everything below North Africa. This term is historically loaded and racially motivated. Sub-Saharan Africa is a catchphrase which assumes some invisible border which divides the north of Africa from the south. There are 4 possible meanings of sub. It can mean under, beneath and below, subordinate to or inferior to. The United Nations Development Programme lists 46 of Africa's 54 countries as sub-Saharan, excluding Algeria, Djibouti, Egypt, Libya, Morocco, Somalia, Sudan and Tunisia. However, it does not take a genius to see that this does not make any geographical sense. Some countries included are on the actual Sahara: Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya and Egypt, each of which has 25 to 75% of their territories to the south covered by the Sahara. Other countries like Mauritania, Mali, Niger, Chad and Sudan have variously between 25 to 75% of their territories to the north covered by the same desert are considered sub-Saharan or non-Mediterranean Africa. If we take a sober look at this map, according to the Bible, all of the territory embossed in green belongs to the land of Ham. This extends up past Israel, encroaches into the Arabian Peninsula, and embodies Shinar. The Middle East is a fraud. This is the land of Ham, Al-Kebulon, Black Africa, the home to the biblical Commissions.
Each of these sons of Ham, Cush, Mizraim, Phut and Canaan, established their own kingdoms, and their descendants contributed to the development of ancient civilizations. They were pioneers in various fields, and their achievements laid the groundwork for future generations. Embarking on a journey through time, we find the echoes of Ham's descendants reverberating through the annals of history. The sons of Ham, Cush, Mizraim, Phut and Canaan each carved out kingdoms that would shape the ancient world. From the fertile lands of Mesopotamia to the river valleys of Egypt, from the bustling ports of Phoenicia to the golden sands of Libya, Ham's progeny planted the seeds of civilization. The influence of Ham's descendants extended beyond their geographical boundaries, leaving an indelible mark on religious thought, cultural practices, and societal norms. They built the first cities, developed writing systems, established trade routes, and created works of art and architecture that still inspire awe today. Their stories, preserved in the Bible and other ancient texts, have been interpreted and reinterpreted, influencing religious beliefs and practices for millennia.
Thank you for watching. Now check out part 2, boasting themselves of Abraham's seed.